Bitcoin is about to have a massive move very soon. And I know all of you are bored. Believe me, I'm super bored too because there was nothing new happening on Bitcoin. And I did have my A level maths exam today. So I have been focusing on that. But now we're back in action because Bitcoin is also about to be back in action. Now, this video, if you watch the previous one, I said that the upcoming 3 videos I produce are going to be incredibly important and you need to watch all of them. So this is part 2 of that 3 video series, but you don't need to really watch the first video to grasp the ideas that I will talk about here because it's going to be so important that the information I mentioned in this video alone are going to be it's going to be enough. So stay with me. It will be an absolutely fantastic video. Of course, you can always smash up the like button. That will mean the world to me. And if you subscribe, turn on the notification bell. I promise you, on Friday, there is going to be a video that you will not want to miss. But with that said, with everything said, what is happening in the next 48 hours is super important. We have the CPI data coming out. And on top of that, tomorrow is the final deadline day for all the institutions that have over $100 million in assets under management to submit their filings to the SEC. And of course, from there, we will be able to understand which institutions, which massive banks, which massive sovereign funds maybe have the Bitcoin ETFs. Last time we were comparing what happened between January 24th to February the 7th. And I mentioned that, Bitcoin was pretty much doing nothing after the US Bitcoin spot ETFs launched for almost a month. I mean, for 26 days, Bitcoin basically didn't do anything. It was the time when I took vacation in Japan. And similarly, you can see that Bitcoin has been doing absolutely nothing for the past 21 days. Now, I think we were here when I last posted my video and I said, look, expect this consolidation to continue for another 6 days. I would not be surprised because the right shoulder of this inverse head and shoulders pattern, it lasted for 9 days. And we could see something similar. I mean, it's a bit of a stretch to call this an inverse head and shoulders anymore. I think a symmetrical triangle makes a lot more sense, but the underlying principles still make the same sort of sense. So we can hide the inverse head and shoulders that happened a few months ago and focus on what is going on with the symmetrical triangle or / inverse head and shoulders, if you still want to call it that. I think Bitcoin is at a make it or break it moment. Yesterday, I wanted to FOMO and add even more longs to my existing long position when Bitcoin was testing 63.2K, but I didn't, and I let you guys know in the Telegram community, which you can join for free at the top right-hand section. I said that the stochastic is crossing bearish, so I do not expect Bitcoin to break above at this point. I really don't think it's going to happen. Probably Bitcoin will be waiting for CPI, and then we will have a move that we would be expecting a pretty significant move, as the price of Bitcoin has been converging for such a long time that it would be due for a significant move very, very soon. And I think the time frame I will give you is like 24 to 36 hours. I don't think it will take longer for Bitcoin to produce a significant move. And of course, Bitcoin is in this falling wedge pattern, and it's refusing to break in either direction, right? And to give you a sort of understanding and analysis of where I personally think Bitcoin is going to go, we need to look at this. So whenever CPI comes out, approximately 6 hours after, Bitcoin on average dumps around 1.1%. So I think when CPI comes out, and I do not like to trade news events, I hate it, especially for Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin will likely have a 1% correction. And why am I expecting that? Well, I'm expecting that not just because Bitcoin has done that for the past 14, 15 CPI events, but inflation is actually going up. Now, the forecasted inflation for this time around, so May, is, I believe, in the same vicinity. So if we refresh this page, is it going to give me a prediction? It doesn't give me a prediction. That's strange. But I think they do look for a 3.5% forecast. Last time, the inflation data really confused people because we were not expecting inflation to rise by this much. So that is why the markets were a little bit shocked, and we did see a short-term massive pullback on Bitcoin. But if you remember, it rebounded significantly higher afterwards. We can take a look at that because actually it was on March. When did it take place? So the 4th the 10th of March. If we go back to the price of Bitcoin, we actually covered this, and I think it was live. Bitcoin crashed for a small period of time, and it rebounded right after. If we go back to the 10th of March, it's at 410, and there we go. Or this is April actually. So Bitcoin was here. We had a small drop in price. It dumped around 1 or 2%. It dumped around 2.4%, and then it rebounded back towards the upside. I think a similar situation could be happening. Bitcoin does like to drop, especially if the inflation metric is not good. And why, you may ask? Well, we've been trying to reduce the interest rates for such a long amount of time. And unfortunately, inflation is not coming down to the 2% target. It's super funny. Like, we were doing the Moon Show with Mr. M, and he said that in the calculation of the CPI, they just recently removed coffee. So for those of you that do not know how the CPI is calculated, how the inflation metric is actually calculated, they look at an underlying basket of goods. So they look at the most used goods and services, I believe, in the past few months. So that would be like clothing, food. In this one you have energy, etc. So you have all the volatile stuff too, and they keep all the modern types of goods and services used or purchased by people, and they evaluate the overall inflation that has happened to these particular goods, and they give you an average on the CPI indicator. But funnily enough, they removed coffee, right? And coffee is something, to my knowledge, that people drink to this day. There's been no change in the demand for coffee, but the inflation on coffee has been 100%. So the government decided to remove coffee as one of the underlying basket of goods calculations for the CPI. So they're clearly playing with the metrics here. We're looking at all the commodities, like we've been joking about orange juice and cocoa and butter and eggs, but all of these necessity goods have been skyrocketing, and they're just simply not captured in the basket of goods. And that's concerning, because why would someone want to conceal a particular piece of data? Well, they would do that if everything is going terrible. And, even Elon Musk made a tweet over the weekend saying that, look, this is how the Federal Reserve works. Of course, if you're in crypto, you are very familiar with the meme of what it says on the back of the rule book of the Monopoly board. It says the bank can just continue printing money, and it will take money from the people once it runs out. And that's why everybody's like, use Bitcoin, because Bitcoin solves this issue. I mean, keep in mind, Treasury bond issuance in 2024 is expected to hit 1.9 trillion. And this surpasses the 2008 financial crisis levels, let alone the actual yield curve for bonds has been inverted for over 500 days. And this happened 3 times since 1920s. We had it during 1974, in the Great Depression of 1929, and in the financial crisis of 2008. So in summary, I think we are due for a massive recession very, very soon. And I think it's going to be happening within the next 2 years. But before we get that recession, we can see that retail individuals, so me and you, we have apparently a lot of money saved up. Because when you do have high interest rates, what happens is you're incentivized to keep your money in the bank. So you can you can take advantage of that high interest and collect free money basically from your bank account. And that's why a lot of retail individuals have a lot of cash sitting in their bank accounts ready to deploy in the market. So as soon as we do get, hopefully, a Fed cut, then people will go crazy on a spending spree. And at that point, I think risk-based assets, so risk-on assets, including Bitcoin, these will take a short-term run towards the upside. That's the only hope you might have, alongside the fact that money printing is back above. The M2 supply is growing, and whenever you print money and you turn on the money printer, usually you add economic stimuli. So this should be coming in the upcoming 6 months or so. But afterwards, I think a huge recession is about to hit us, and everything, including Bitcoin, the stock market, will likely have a big, big drawdown. Now, before I get into the Trump news, which was super interesting, I want to take a look quickly at the Bitcoin ETFs, because they've been doing pretty much nothing. We're still seeing some outflows from Grayscale. We were very shocked when $63 million for the first time was injected into Grayscale. It was the first time since the January 11 launch that Grayscale had inflows rather than outflows. And, I really thought that this would create a huge pump in the markets, but it didn't. That's why I refrained from making a video, because I wanted to see how this played out. But no, nobody seems to care anymore. Hong Kong ETFs, one of the most bullish narratives that we were, expecting to push Bitcoin towards the 100K region, we had an outflow of 39 million. And if you look at the accumulation, we're now eating into the pre-seed accumulation of the ETF. It's not looking good. Bitcoin is currently narrativeless. And if you look at it, we're getting incredible news, like the EU Securities Authority is exploring to add Bitcoin and crypto exposure to their 12 trillion euro market. We're seeing JP Morgan disclosing that they have Bitcoin ETFs in their portfolios, whereas a couple of years ago, they said that, actually not a couple of years ago, a few months ago, JP Morgan CEO said that Bitcoin's a fraud and a Ponzi scheme. Like, after getting such bullish news, including a former president and the current leading president and potential president in polls saying that Bitcoin, he likes the concept of crypto. He says that he doesn't think that the Fed chair is doing a good job with it, and that he made NFTs great again. Like, once we get this type of news, Bitcoin should be skyrocketing towards the upside. If this was Bitcoin in 2021, from this piece of information alone, from President Trump saying something like this about Bitcoin, the potential future president, like, it would have gone parabolic like that. But now we've reached a point in the market where nobody seems to care. And again, another funny thing is that President Trump in 2021 said that Bitcoin just feels like a scam. So that's a 360 turn. He launched his own NFT collection. This was, this kind of conference type thing was for his NFT holders. It was pretty crazy. Like, this, I can do an entire video on. Maybe we'll revisit later on. But, it's just, these should be pushing Bitcoin towards the upside. Of course, why would President Trump say something like this? He is a rightist. He's a Republican. He believes in free market economy, in the lack of government intervention. So he wants to reduce taxes, which is terrible for the future of the economy. But hey, it's going to get him votes. Just like advocating crypto is going to get him to 38.4 million adults, which is like 15% of total adults in the US. That's a huge number of people. And then you have President Biden, who's completely against it, vetoing a bill for banks to be holding custody of Bitcoin. Again, a completely different topic. So in summary, I think Bitcoin is not, we're going to be going through a tough time for Bitcoin. In the macro landscape, it's super hard to speculate due to all of these various different factors that I mentioned to you. But in the short term, we just need to focus on this symmetrical triangle. What am I doing in terms of my trading? That's a great question. Well, look, we talked about this hammer reversal candle. We talked about Bitcoin hitting the 30-period moving average and continuing in its bullish upwards momentum inside this parabola. But I also said, look, I want the next week's candle to be closing above the close of the hammer reversal candle, which is something that did not happen. And we can see that the moving averages are heading down. If we have a crossover of, the 310 and 30 all in one shot, that is a huge sign for a short-term or a long-term bear market. Like when we saw the US ETF approvals, then we had the market dump. Yes, the 3 and 10 moving averages crossed into each other, pretty bearish, but we did not get a crossover into the 30 SMA. As soon as we get all three of them crossing over, which would take place if Bitcoin goes back down to 57K and stays there for a while, then it's game over. So the only piece of hope you might have is that Bitcoin breaks bullishly above this falling wedge pattern. And in terms of opening a position, I'm already in the long. I've DCA'd into the long that we opened together at 43K. And I think the average buy-in now sits at like 58, 60K. So the only point where I would scale more into my longs is if Bitcoin closes above 63.3K with a bullish confirmation, right? So we would have to close a daily candle above 63K, stay above. A retest would be beautiful, but usually on the daily time frame, we don't tend to see that, especially with Bitcoin. So as soon as we cross here and we close the daily candle, maybe I'll take that risk and add more to my own positions. It's super annoying that Bitcoin is not following the stock market because the stock market rebounded perfectly after hitting the 21 EMA. Bitcoin did the same thing, but we kind of broke correlation at this point. It's just looking very interesting. You can follow the Telegram community. I'll be updating as soon as there's something different. And of course, stay tuned on the channel because I do expect a huge break. So in summary, 1% drawdown after the CPI data and a recovery, and hopefully a break above the falling wedge pattern would be beautiful. Also, I'm just going to hint this. I was not going to, but I've been working on this. So me and my team, we've been working on the CryptoKid.com website, and I am, like I promised, going to be launching a newsletter. So I already basically post my research reports, but I want to make it more and more advanced and make it more for a gated community. So if you want to sign up for the newsletter, in the meantime, you can do so over on CryptoKid.com. I'll put a link in the description down below. But yeah, so you guys can get a quick teaser of what is coming up. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm super excited to be back. No more exams. I do have one more in like a week's time. So let's see what happens there. But thank you all so much for your wishes in the Telegram. You were all fantastic. And yeah, guys, have a beautiful day. Take care. And I'll see you all very soon. Bye bye.